The Prophet alone had the title of God's messenger, which endowed him with the power to command the Muslims at least, because the Quran says in quite a few verses, obey God and obey the messenger. One single verse says, obey God and obey the messenger and the possessors of authority among you. And it said that this arose because when the Prophet sent out some expedition, some people were in doubt as to what extent they had to follow their commander that the Prophet had designated. So the first officials designated other than the Prophet were commanders of expeditions that were sent out. In the year 628, the Prophet brought a large group of Muslims to the outskirts of Mecca to attempt to make what is called the lesser pilgrimage, or Umrah, which is the type of pilgrimage that you can make any time of the year. Because the main pilgrimage can only be made in the pilgrimage season on certain particular days, which is why you have this huge gathering of people there at Mecca during the Hajj, the greater pilgrimage. But the Umrah can be performed any time during the year. And so that's called the lesser pilgrimage, and it's of lesser merit than the great pilgrimage is. So the Prophet in the year 628 attempted to make the Umrah with a large group of Muslims that came to the outskirts of Mecca, but the Meccans blocked them from entering the town. Instead of a battle, however, there were negotiations and a peace was agreed to, that the two sides were to observe the peace, including their allies, and the Muslims were required to return Qurayshi fugitives who came to Mecca, but the Quraysh did not have to return Muslim fugitives. In return, the Quraysh agreed to evacuate their city in the following year for a few days so that the Muslims could make the Umrah the next year, and indeed that happened. And this peace is referred to in Surah 48 of the Quran, which was revealed about that time. Satisfied with the peace, Muhammad is said then to have invited the foreign rulers of Byzantium, Iran, Abyssinia, and other lands to become Muslims about this time. Although, from a chronological viewpoint, it's probably too early for that. But anyhow, that's what is in the tradition about that aspect. So this peace of Hudaybiyyah was a truce that was made with the non-Muslim pagans by the Prophet Muhammad, and was recognized and allowed by revelations of the Quran also. And so that forms an important basis later for diplomatic representations, negotiations, and peace among nations in Islamic tradition. In 630, certain allies of the Meccans violated the peace treaty by attacking another tribe allied to Medina. So Muhammad sent an army to Mecca, and the Meccans surrendered almost without bloodshed. In fact, in spite of what I wrote here, probably the surrender of Mecca was prearranged because some of the Meccans had already decided to give up the fight, and so they decided to become Muslims. And so, except for a few diehards who tried to resist the fight taking over of the city, the Muslims came into Mecca. And although the Prophet reminded the Meccans of their persecution of the Muslims and their confiscation of the emigrants' property and so forth, he renounced the claim to the Muslim property that had been confiscated by the Meccans, which probably helped to reconcile their hearts and may have been part of the arrangement for the surrender of Mecca. And he also appointed the first actual official other than himself in the nascent state 2 years before he died. He appointed Attab ibn Asid to be the governor of Mecca because Mecca was too far away for him to govern himself. And he destroyed the idols in Mecca. Yeah, that's mentioned on this slide. So the Meccans said, you're pardoned, and the Meccans accepted Islam. Attab ibn Asid was appointed the governor over Mecca. Interesting, Attab ibn Asid curiously left a word in the English language based on his name. Do any of you know that story? You'll never be able to guess what the word is from looking at Attab ibn Asid either. Well, when the Muslims had set up the city of Kufa in Iraq later, after the Muslim conquest of Iraq, after the Prophet had died, eventually there was a marketplace there that was named for Attab ibn Asid called Suq al-Attabiyyah, meaning the Attabi market. And in that market, they sold a kind of cloth that was called, a striped cloth called Attabi. And this cloth was traded to Europe. And it once was much sought after, but then has been forgotten now for many centuries. And so after the first syllable was dropped, you had the word tabby formed out of that. And the tabby cat was named for the stripes on the Attabi cloth. So tabby cat is, that word tabby is an Arabic word, actually. And so Muhammad was able to return to Medina without leaving a single soldier in Mecca, and all of the idols in Mecca were destroyed. And then after that, the city of Ta'if was besieged for several months, and it accepted Islam in 631 and surrendered. So the basic core area of the Hijaz had then become Muslim, but this was only a few months before the Prophet died. And the city of Ta'if was a different tribe, the tribe of Thaqif, and it was sort of allied with the Quraysh, and many of the leaders of the early Islamic caliphate came from Ta'if originally. So numerous other expeditions and campaigns also occurred, all growing out of the original expulsion of the Muslims from Mecca. In all of these battles, the casualties armies were small and casualties few compared with later eras. By 632, most of the people in the Arabian Peninsula had embraced Islam as their religion, at least formally, but mostly only in the last couple of years before the Prophet died. And there still existed some Jewish, Christian, and other religious groups, especially in Yemen, and they retained their religious as well as judicial autonomy. And of course, the Jews in Yemen existed down to the 20th century when some 64,000 Jews migrated from Yemen to the state of Israel, both before Israel was established and after that. And that indicates, well, Judaism continued to exist and flourish in Yemen all that time. The Prophet made his paradigmatic pilgrimage in the year 632, a few months, about 3 months before he died. And he gave in his farewell sermons that belief in one God without images or symbols, equality of all the believers without distinction of race or class, superiority of individuals being based solely on piety, because that canceled out the tribal favoritism, which you managed to unite the people under the idea of this equality. Sanctity of life, property, and honor, abolition of interest and of vendettas and private justice, better treatment of women, obligatory inheritance and distribution of property of deceased persons among your relatives of both sexes, and the removal of the possibility of accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few. And then, so the Quran and the behavior of the Prophet, the Sunnah, are supposed to be examples of how Muslims should live their daily lives. Then the Prophet became sick and died in June 632, and had the satisfaction of knowing at least that his mission had succeeded to a point.